Brentford 2, Chelsea 2, Chelsea failing to end their winless run against Brentford. Alright, it didn't end as disastrously as it looked like it was going to when Wissa scored an overhead kick and Chelsea seemed to be heading for another defeat. But I don't think that my overall emotion, despite a late rally, which I give the player some credit for, is going to completely change my perspective on that second half and the way it played out. And I think probably a lot of the way people will be analysing this game. You know, I think I'm pretty fair with head coaches at Chelsea. I think I'm not someone who just instinctively and is reactionary and just, kicks the boot in. And, I'm never someone to go on the out bandwagon because I think so much of it is just really cringe-inducing and stuff like that. But there are times, of course, where I sit there and think, at the very least, if a manager is replaced, I'm not going to lose much sleep. And, this was one of those days, once again, for Mauricio Pochettino, because Chelsea had a very, not amazing first half, but decent first half, I would say, in all the things we spoke about in my preview and all the things about Brentford, of how physical they're going to be, how direct they're going to be. And Nicolas Jackson in particular had, really spurned an amazing opportunity, and you were thinking, is that going to be defining for his game? But he turns around a couple minutes later, gets on the end of an amazing Malo Gusto ball, which it almost felt like a very similar to the goal he scored at Villa Park last month. And Chelsea were up, and running, and you thought, okay, this is a great opportunity. A team really lacking form, lacking basically their whole defence because of injury. In the second half, can Chelsea take it to another level, take the game away from Brentford and walk away with 3 points? And it's a pattern we have seen so consistently, but especially over the past week. And I'm sure people will look back at, games earlier in the season and find it as well. Lapses and a massive downgrade in performance and concentration post the interval, which goes straight to the heart of people's criticisms around Pochettino. It looks squarely at the head coach, and I don't think that's an unfair assessment, because Chelsea, I thought, had dealt with Brentford's aerial threat pretty well. They are unorthodox. They will try and get the ball inside that box in a variety of ways. It's not just from corners. It's not just from free kicks. It's not even from long throws. I mean, sometimes they'll play a throw short a little bit and then cross it in. But that's what Brentford do. That's Brentford's game. But Chelsea, I thought, with the back three that Pochettino chose to go for today of Chalobah, Disasi and Levi Colwill, had managed that situation pretty well. And Chelsea on transition, particularly using the width of Malo Gusto, I thought Chelsea had done all right and scored a goal, 1-0 up. But the way that performance deteriorated to a point where Chelsea are actually lucky to walk away with a point given the number of chances Brentford had in that second half. They hit the post twice in that half. There were chances consistently, and being overwhelmed and the players looking completely unable to understand how they were going to not only stifle Brentford but try and get back into the game. It was a disastrous half. I think that for me is clear, and I don't think just because Brentford missed those chances or we got a little bit of fortune because it hit the post, I can't move away from that. Roslev scores the first one, and it's just absolutely a scrappy, really sloppy goal as well to concede. It wasn't, one of those obvious, set piece opportunities that Brentford will be looking at. Neither of their goals came from those moments, but it was just really poor and passive from our defenders. I don't think Axel Disasi comes out of that moment looking very good. You always look at the goalkeeper in that situation. Could Petrovic maybe command things a little bit more in that situation, or just it looked too passive, and it was a really, really poor goal to concede. And it summed up the opening 5 minutes of the second half, where Chelsea looked underwhelming and were paid the price for it, absolutely. But then the momentum of the game was only heading one way, and Brentford continued to attack. They pounced on Chelsea errors. They threw more balls into the box. They used the momentum of the home crowd. All things that previous Chelsea teams have experienced at that ground, but then we all knew was coming. Even what they did at Stamford Bridge earlier in the season. That's how Brentford are going to be attacking you. And Pochettino was unable to change it in any feasible way. And then the second goal comes and you're not entirely shocked. You think it's justified. You think that goal had been coming for quite a while, and it was another ball into the box where it lands at the feet of Wissa, who'd been trying several acrobatics throughout the game, and eventually one pays off. From that moment, I saw very little evidence that Chelsea were going to get back into the game. They built very little rhythm. The things that had worked in the first half of using the width of the wing backs, or I thought Enzo Fernandez at times in the first half had been able to play the ball behind Brentford's defence for Nicolas Jackson. Very little of that was on play in the second half, and you were just looking at it and going, where is a goal going to come from? One, let alone two. And it was really looking like the end days for Pochettino, because it really did feel like, and this, again, Axel Disasi in some ways redeems the criticism I give him earlier in the game by stepping up, getting on the edge of a cross. Chelsea absolutely did turn the screw in that last 15 minutes. And I think the bringing on McCallum, Mudryk, bringing on a bit of energy, moving to a back four, I think helped Chelsea a little bit of being able to move players further up the pitch. And I also think maybe Brentford, there was a sense of maybe, whether it was fatigue or just a lack of confidence to hang on to that result, really, that allowed Chelsea back into it. And they dropped off. So then Chelsea were able to press up the pitch. And nice to see Disasi at the back post look, really commanding, got himself in that situation and was first to the ball, and Chelsea get themselves level, and of course were really pressing for a winner in the last 10 minutes. But it was just a complete mess. And I think this is the question, these are the questions you have to ask yourself, about Pochettino, about what, especially with people who are much more negative about Pochettino and like want him sacked right now, is a counter argument to that. You have to answer these questions. What hope and faith is there? Like, what is the optimism around performances? Because the setup to a back three was effective, or at least in the first half, and was rational, I think, in terms of what you're trying to counteract. But I also think on the flip side, it is a very short-termist, one-game approach. And it looks like survival football. It doesn't look like expansive. Even if maybe we're going to falter in one aspect, I'm trying to build something bigger. So we're looking elsewhere. Like, our priority is more in the attacking play. I want to make this attack click. Or for whatever it is that you're focusing on as a football team with a head coach, to go to that back three and then for it not to work out and for you to collapse so easily in the second half and will under that pressure, and then have a look of a team that have no ideas on the ball, that look easily beatable, that have given goals away in obvious ways and not even the most challenging ways to opposition. And as a fan, as a supporter, if you're in the away ground, if you're watching those games, if you've been watching the games this season, it's always the thing as a fan, I think, that people need to look at, rather than just looking at a spreadsheet or looking at whatever it is to try and, look at the long term, which I appreciate and I do a lot. Where's that energy? Where is that enthusiasm? Where is that inspiration for watching Chelsea? I don't get it from this team when I see performances like that. I don't see it even in midweek, which I know, wasn't a dramatic game. Chelsea won it 3-2. But when I see football that looks to me only reliant on one game, where I don't really see an overwhelming sense of direction or a sense that players are forming better connections with each other, and you have maybe one player standing out like Malo Gusto, but a lot of others seeming to regress, not seeming to improve, it really does, pose a question of where we're going, and giving time to a head coach over a long period of time. Where are we going to be in a year's time? And the fear that we could be very much in the same place. And that's my big criticism of Mauricio Pochettino. I don't know how you can expect fans to look at performances like this against teams who, we have to say, the context here, this is why you can't have excuses about today's game and result. Brentford had all of their back four out. I think they've lost something like 7 out of their last 12. They have lost a lot of games recently. So this is not a team in good form. This is not even the best Brentford team of recent years. Ivan Toney had a relatively quiet game today. He wasn't one of the big threats for Brentford. This is not a high-end firing Brentford team. This is one staring down the barrel of potential relegation because of their form. They have been outdone. They have been outplayed. They have tried to play defensive and they've been undone in that aspect. They were battered easily by Liverpool recently. They will be beaten, I'm sure, by teams in upcoming weeks. And it can't be a surprise anymore for me when I see Chelsea rock up there and fold in the way they did in that second half for a lot of it until Disasi stepped up for an equaliser. But that doesn't make it acceptable. And you don't, as a fan, feel that I'm going to enjoy watching this team. I have great confidence that in a month's time, we're going to be in a better place. Because if you look back a month, it's not the sense that, football doesn't always go like that when you're building a team. Of course, you're going to have dips, and especially with a young team, like that's not my point. But especially when we start going into kind of methods that I think truly are just about survival and getting from game to game to game, it doesn't really spark an environment that I think is conducive to long-term improvement. And I don't know how it's going to benefit the young players Chelsea have invested in. So I can't lose much sleep if there is a manager change. I still don't think there will be. I mean, he's got away with it because Disasi has equalised. And of course, the FA Cup is still there for Chelsea this season. But I can't really argue against people sitting there and going, I can't stomach watching this for months and months. And there are deeper issues at Chelsea, as we know. And I always address that too. I always put that part of the argument. But I think it's irrational and doesn't really tell the story. There's got to be a level of responsibility for coaches and players. And I always say that, right? And I think that from a coaching point of view, when I see a trend of teams coming out after an interval of whatever kind, whether it's full time to extra time or half time to the second half, and I see the team get worse and they look more clueless, questions have to be posed towards a head coach. And again, it's two routes in my mind, and neither of them are favourable to Mauricio Pochettino. Either he is advising that team to sit deep, which is why they're coming out quite passive, not good, especially when things have been working in the first half. Or on the second front, the players just aren't taking those instructions on board, which again doesn't really give you much credibility as a head coach. Why does this happen under a variety of opponents? It's not just like one opponent this happens against. A team like Brentford, who do ask questions of you that other teams in the Premier League don't. We've seen this in the extra time against Liverpool, a young Liverpool team, not their best. We've seen this against Leeds in the second half in midweek. We've now seen that against Brentford. We're looking at three different teams: a team near the top of the Premier League, a team near the top of the Championship, and a team really struggling with form. Those are patterns and trends that people can just not overlook and go and just wipe to one side. You can't just have a go at fatigue. You can't have a go at injuries, because Brentford have their own injury crisis worse than Chelsea, and we should feasibly have a better quality of player to deal with these environments. So we've got quite a break now, actually, in considering our recent schedule now to the Newcastle game, but it's not convincing. And I'm happy we didn't lose. It didn't entirely ruin my weekend, but it's not a good result either.